Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Dr. Sarah Shaw, who's here to share with us her new book, Breathing Mindfulness, Discovering the Riches at the Heart of the Buddhist Path. What if the simple act of breathing held the key to deeper insight, inner peace, and even spiritual awakening? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Dr. Sarah Shaw is a faculty member and tutor at the University of Oxford and a visiting contemplative mentor at Brown University. She has taught and published numerous works on the history and practices of Buddhism. So welcome to the show, Dr. Sarah Shaw.
Hello, Marianne. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. So what inspired you to write this?
Well, I started doing a breathing mindfulness practice years ago, and I found it so transformatory and it changed so much in my life. I was always very interested just to find out about the background. So I became very interested in Buddhism because it was a breathing mindfulness calm practice, samatha practice. And I read a lot of books about the subject. And I found a very odd thing that my method wasn't mentioned, or if it was, at that time it was considered very unfashionable in Southeast Asia. And they said, oh, no, you don't want to practice a samatha practice. And I was finding it so helpful, and I had so much peace and happiness from my own practice of breathing mindfulness. I wanted to find out more. So this book is really my exploration of all the different kinds of breathing mindfulness. And I try to show how they're all connected together and all related to each other, but they have slightly different qualities and emphases. And I'm very happy with my method, and I know many people who are very happy with very different methods. And I wanted to give that broad survey because I'd never been able to read anything that gave that to me.
So what even started you on this path on the theme of breathing mindfulness? What even got you going?
Well, I was a student and very stressed, and I had a lot of sickness and bereavement at home. So I was feeling quite lost, really. And I met somebody in a coffee bar who said, oh, well, I go to a meditation class. And this is quite a few decades ago. And I thought, oh, I've heard this word meditation. It helps to make you calm. So I just went along, and I wasn't very good at it. And although we were supposed to follow the breath, I was terrible at trying to find my breath. But there was some atmosphere in the room. I knew that's what I needed. There was some real stillness there. And I knew that that's exactly what I wanted. I persevered, and then I just started to notice real effects in my daily life. And one day I just had a very wonderful experience of just complete joy. And I felt, oh, my mind's found its natural home. Well, afterwards I thought that. At the time I was just thinking how wonderful it was. And then I realized that my mind had just felt completely at home for the first time in my life, just filled with happiness and just a sense of problems just going away. So I've always been interested in sort of placing that and in finding out about other methods and how they work as well.
I really like how in your book you really explore the different methods for breathing mindfulness and how one practice may actually resonate better with somebody versus another.
Mm. I do feel that's very important because when I started to research this book, I found that teachers, rightly for their own method, extolled its benefits, said how good it would be. And of course, they were all right for their own method, for the right person. But I suppose over the years, I've met so many people who've done very different methods. And I realized that they're just as at home in their method as I am in mine. So I didn't want to make it partisan. I didn't want to say one was better than another. I really wanted to make the point that you find the method which suits you and then stick to it.
What are some of the reasons that people would practice breathing mindfulness?
Well, it's simple. It's cheap. The breath is always there. Um, I think that might be an initial motivation, just that it's an obvious choice of meditation that we have around all the time, and we hope, and it feels a very natural object for meditation. I can only speak for myself, really, but this is corroborated by other people I know, that there's something about watching the breath which does become very calming, but you also have a sense of things moving and changing because the breath never stays still. It's always moving. We can feel it in our whole body. We can feel the breath. But there isn't a sense that it's static. So it's such a simple object for meditation that's there all the time that can arouse both calm, stillness, samatha, and also insight, vipassana. So I think that's why it has become so popular, because obviously when you're sitting in meditation, you're secluded from other people and you can really enter into meditation states and explore them. But during your daily life, you can just have an awareness of the breath in the background. You obviously don't want to go into a meditation state when you're shopping. And you can just have that awareness of the breath in the background. And it does help to arouse both mindfulness and calm. If you can do that even just a few times during the day, it makes a big difference.
Can people reach different levels of awareness or awakening when they do breathing mindfulness practices?
It leads to very deep meditative states called jhana, and there are several of these. In some traditions, people prefer to go more towards vipassana, insight, to see rise and fall. And the breath is a medium which can be used for any of those purposes. And that's what really makes it so wonderful as a meditation practice. The Buddha called it his sublime practice, because it can be used, it can be understood and known differently as suits the person and the method.
I think that's so empowering. In your book, you share this metaphor of the forest. How does this help readers to understand the nature of breathing mindfulness?
Well, the metaphor was found because it helped me understand the nature of breathing mindfulness. I went on a wonderful forest walk in the Cairngorms there in Scotland, and I was explained all the way that the trees communicated to each other. They needed foliage, they needed ground cover, and they needed networks of communication between each other, but they stood on their own ground. And at that time, I was trying to get an overall sense of all the different methods. And I realized this was a very wonderful and apt metaphor for the different varieties of breathing mindfulness. The Buddha, of course, sat under a tree to practice when he became enlightened. But trees adapt and they change according to circumstances. So the same species of tree in another part of the forest will have different phenomes, and the rhizomes will be different, and the genomes, and these technical words for different genetic changes and different relationships with the environment. And I felt, well, this is just really like a breathing mindfulness practice, that you might have a species of practice that in a different person and in a different culture, they might need different adaptations to adjust to their environment and to relate to it. Because mindfulness, of course, is in the Buddhist tradition is regarded as being internal, inside oneself, being aware of things outside, and being aware of things inside and outside. And trees have to do that. They have to relate to their environment and adapt. So it helped me understand all the different forms when I saw them just as different adaptations from the original teachings of the Buddha. And I feel it is in the spirit of Buddhism that they adapted when they went to new cultures, and when they adapt according to different temperaments. People need different things. The Buddha always taught like that. He never said to people, right, this is what you're all going to be doing, that's it. He listened very, very carefully to the people he was teaching. He let them speak, he heard their problems, he listened to their questions, and then he gave a meditation practice to them. And it's that feeling of adaptability and a willingness to see the individual as important that was certainly how I was taught meditation, and how I feel meditation can and should be taught. And the Theravada tradition talks about the good friend, Kalyanamitta, who helps you and guides you. And I think we all need that, really, because we are all different and will have a different relationship with the breath. So I felt that the forest really gave me a sense of a community, but where each tree stood its own ground.
What a beautiful metaphor. I really like how you pull and have this all together so it makes such a visual for people that they're able to really see how this all relates. So as you were pulling your information for this book, what challenges, if any, did you face in just kind of tracing the history and diversity of breathing practices?
It was very, very difficult. I always, the way I write books is I like to chat to people a lot. And luckily, I know a lot of very long-term practitioners in, I'd say, pretty well all of the traditions I talk about, nearly all of them. And so I could ask them what they felt about the tradition, because I didn't want to read somebody saying, oh, well, you shouldn't practice that tradition because it's no good. I wanted to speak to the practitioners. I wanted to find out about the root teachers, and they put me, in touch with the right resources to find out more. I did 1 or 2 interviews with people, and it was difficult. But eventually I found a way of steering through all the material, just looking at a lot of primary sources, finding the original teachings of different schools and traditions around South and Southeast Asia. But primarily just I like to talk to people and listen to their perspective of their own tradition. So that helped me a lot. But it wasn't easy finding things.
I can only imagine. Was there anything in your research that surprised you?
Um, oh, what a very good question. Just the immense sense of variety and adaptability of the original Breathing Mindfulness Sutta. I just hadn't imagined there were so many varieties, and that one instruction, I think the very first instruction of the Breathing Mindfulness Sutta of the Buddha is mindfully they breathe in, and mindfully they breathe out, mindfully they breathe in a long breath, mindfully they breathe out a long breath. Now you'd think it would be very simple, which of course it is, but the different ways people interpret it, some say that you guide the breath to become long, other people say you just notice it, other people say it doesn't matter what length of breath you have, you just are aware of which length of breath it is. And other traditions make a differentiation between the long and the next instruction, the short breath. And that surprised me. I was amazed at how many correct ways 2 lines of an original sutta could be interpreted, because I didn't feel any of them were wrong. They all seemed to have really rich understandings of those 2 lines. So that surprised me and pleased me as well, because I think we can take texts as being too rigid and there's only one way of doing things. But if the teacher is skillful with words, as the Buddha was, an instruction can be applied in many different ways. And I like that very much. And it surprised me.
What a just extraordinary journey you've been on. As you have compiled all this information together, one of the things I'm curious about is how the four foundations of mindfulness play an understanding in this practice.
Well, they are related in the Anapanasati Sutta, which is in the Middle Length Sayings, the Majjhima Nikaya. They're related. There are 16 stages in the sutta, and the first four are related to the body, the second four to feeling, the third to chitta, mind, and the fourth to everything. So the fourth tetrad is about letting go and breathing with an awareness of impermanence and letting go of things. And that's all in the fourth tetrad, the fourth foundation of mindfulness. Whereas the first one, for instance, is very bodily based. Mindfully, they breathe in a long breath. Mindfully, they breathe out a long breath and a short breath. And then mindfully, they experience the body, the kaya, the whole, which is usually interpreted as being the whole body, and then make that body tranquil. So that's the first foundation of mindfulness. So each of the tetrads takes a foundation or is associated with a foundation of mindfulness. And I think the idea is that if you are aware of the breath, it isn't just an idea, it's actually said you will fulfill all the foundations of mindfulness. Perhaps in time, but you will be aware of your body. If you're really mindful of the breath, you have to be aware of feeling because you can feel feelings with the breath. You become aware of your mind, whether it's racing around or whether it's peaceful. And then you become aware of everything, the events going on in the body and the mind and outside. And it gives you a way of steering through the four foundations of mindfulness because you always have the breath. So it's like an anchor, really, that keeps you steady as you go.
For someone that's new and just starting out with breathing mindfulness, where do you suggest they start?
I would say find somebody you trust. Uh, I think Jack Cornfield wrote a book, didn't he? A Path with Heart, and that's always that. Those words have always resonated with me. That look around, perhaps go to meditation classes, and just when you feel there's somebody you can trust and a method you can feel will suit you. When you find that, just to stick with it and give it a go. I would also suggest that if possible, go to a tradition where you can get some individual guidance. That seems to me very important as breathing mindfulness develops, so that you can actually have ideally one-to-one consultations with a teacher. I certainly needed that. And I think people to develop tend to want it, and they certainly need it for the practice to develop well and in a healthy way. You really do need to be able to talk about it and to have somebody else just steer you a bit in the right direction if you're going a bit off track.
Having that guidance is so important. My goodness.
Mm, mm, mm.
What do you hope readers and our listeners will take away from your book, Breathing Mindfulness?
What I hope they'll feel is that the method, if they're already doing a practice, that the method they're doing is valid and has ancient roots, and so they won't sometimes people say, oh, yours is not a very good method or something. And I want to reassure people that if it's an established method, it will have ancient roots. And I'd also like them to feel more empathy with other traditions. I think you should stick to your own, but it is important to be attuned to others and to know what other people are practicing and not to judge it. It does concern me, and I suppose it's just human nature. It's a bit like football teams, that my team is always the best. But it does concern me that sometimes you hear of people in certain traditions criticizing other traditions, and that doesn't feel the way of the Buddha to me. So I hope it gives people that sense, A, that their practice has validation and that you can really trace back ancient roots, which are really interesting to explore and find out about, but also that they'll feel more empathy to people who may choose to do a different kind of practice.
Well, Sarah, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about breathing mindfulness?
Well, my tradition is called Samatha Breathing Mindfulness, and we have a website. It's called samatha.org, samatha.org. And in the UK, we're called the Samatha Trust. And in the USA, we're called the Samatha Foundation. And we offer online teaching for people who can't get to meditation teachers. So if people would like to give it a go, they're very welcome to go to the website. And we offer online groups and teachings for people if they prefer to learn that way.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
And thank you, Marianne, for your sympathetic questions. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Breathing Mindfulness. Breathing Mindfulness is available everywhere books are sold, and you can purchase this book directly from the publisher at shambhala.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.